The black dragon came out of the clouds like a thrown spear, a streak of shadow cutting straight toward the tower's peak. There was no time to think. The group ran. The dragon's wings thundered the air apart as it descended. From its jaws came a torrent of acid that melted Chett and Braden where they stood and dropped Arekk in a single, horrifying instant. Zandros blasted the tower door open with a crack of eldritch force. Coraline and Doug turned back at the sound of Arekk crying out, but Lee was already moving. The merchant sprinted past them, scooping Arekk up in one smooth motion. The dragon's jaws snapped toward him. Doug barreled into the dragon's head with a flying shoulder barge, knocking its bite off course just long enough for everyone to dive inside. They ran down the spiraling stairs, the tower shaking under the dragon's fury. Lee fed Arekk a potion as they ran. The wizard sputtered awake and was set to running on his own. The dragon slammed into the tower again, its claws and snout punching through the stone walls in bursts of rubble. Coraline surged forward, casting a binding spell upon it. Its wings locked, and it scrambled to take hold, falling off the side of the tower. Its last wild blast of acid missed the group, but ate through the stairs below and ceilings above, leaving the steps collapsing in chunks. They ran on, leaping the broken gaps and dodging falling stones and acid streams. As the stairs fell apart more and more, Coraline tied sections together with conjured vines, while Zandros leapt between falling stones quick as a shadow. As they reached the bottom, they charged through the lower hall and burst out onto the street. In horror, they looked up and watched as the tower cracked in two. The top began to fall, directly toward them. In the same moment, the dragon burst through a building, roaring with fury before lunging after them. They ran with everything they had left, the tower's shadow rapidly growing above them, the dragon gaining on them, its acrid jaws at their backs, preparing to strike. Crash! The tower top landed, burying not the group, but the dragon, in a mountain of broken stone. The impact launched the group forward, and moments later, bruised, battered, but alive, they rose to their feet. For a moment, there was silence. Then the stones began to shift. The dragon roared and began to claw its way free, blooded, but very much alive. The group considered whether they could finish it off. Lee didn't let the thought linger. Run! As they ran, Zandros called out warnings to help the group dodge the gathering spirits, everyone narrowly avoiding touching them and being pulled into blinding visions. As they reached the boats, the dragon leapt from a rooftop, landing behind them. Lee shoved a crate into Doug's hands and told him to throw it. Doug hurled it with all his strength. As it sailed toward the dragon's head, Lee yelled for Arekk to shoot it. Arekk obliged. The crate exploded mid-air, coating the dragon's head in a sticky, incendiary substance that ignited instantly. The dragon shrieked as its flesh burned and its eyes melted shut. It thrashed blindly, roaring in agony. The group scrambled into their boats and paddled until their arms could paddle no more. Only when the ruins were a distant silhouette, and the dragon's roars a faint echo, did they stop. Doug, panting, asked what had been in the crate. Lee explained it was a substance he'd learned to make in the jungles of Sutherland, a highly flammable adhesive the natives called napalm. He added with a sigh that if they wanted more, he was unfortunately fresh out. As they rested, drifting at a slower pace, the group replayed the battle, celebrating each other's heroics and laughing about how close they had come to death. When the others told Arekk it had been Lee who'd run back to save him, he grew quiet. Hours later, as the sky darkened, they realized they wouldn't make it out of the swamp before nightfall. They debated pressing on, but Lee insisted it was better to camp. Black dragons held grudges that could last centuries, and they were relentless in their pursuit of vengeance. If it found them, it was far better to face it rested on dry land than exhausted in flimsy canoes. Then Lee pointed out a column of smoke rising from a nearby island, and admitted he could really use a warm fire and a hot meal. Coraline eagerly agreed. The others, stomachs growling, followed suit. They reached the island under the cover of night. Lee stayed behind to ready the boats in case they needed to flee. The group crept through the tree line toward the firelight. Sitting alone by the flames was a rugged, dark-haired man in ramshackle armor, smoking a cigar and sharpening a great sword. An eye patch covered his right eye, partially hiding a deep scar. Then the smell of cooked meat hit them. Spit roasted over the fire was a giant snake, half-eaten. Without looking up, the man spoke, his voice a smooth growl. "If you're going to join me, then join me. No use squatting in the bushes." Coraline whispered, "How did he hear us?" Doug shrugged, his armor rattling. They stepped into the clearing. Doug asked how he knew they weren't monsters. The man looked up, his demeanor shifting as his single, sharp, grey eye locked with Doug's. "Monsters would have been quieter," he said, glancing at Doug's armor. Doug was so flustered by the reply that he was lost for words, turning so red he nearly matched his beard. Doug was saved from further embarrassment when Lee strode into the clearing, calling out "Javik" with genuine relief. He explained that Javik was the escort he'd mentioned earlier. He had known no swamp beast was a match for him, and judging by the feast before them, he had been proven right. After talking with Javik over a hearty serpentine meal, the group prepared to sleep. Lee insisted on taking first watch in thanks for the group's protection, letting them get some extra rest. Arekk, usually suspicious, was so enticed by the idea of skipping a watch that he immediately vanished into his tent. Coraline volunteered for second watch, Javik for third. As Coraline settled in her tent, she noticed Reef lingering. She could feel that he wanted to stay up and play with Lee. She let him. Reef floated over and resumed a game of patty cake with Lee. Coraline realized her bond with Reef was deepening. Now, even at this distance, she could feel Reef's emotions, his comfort, and his happiness. Smiling, she went to bed. Lee's watch passed quietly. He and Reef woke Coraline, and Coraline later woke Javik. During Javik's watch, the swamp's constant chorus fell eerily silent. Then came the distant sound of a roaring dragon. No, not one dragon, 2 dragons, and they didn't seem to be getting along. Javik went to wake the others by kicking their tents. Xandros was up instantly. Arekk, having already finished his trance, was reading the skin-bound tome taken from the hag. The others stirred more slowly, with Coraline turning out to be an absolute grouch to wake, and Doug sleepily rolling out of his tent in his long johns, scratching his belly. Last was Lee. As Javik approached his tent, the roaring stopped. The swamp fell silent again. Javik kicked the tent anyway. Suddenly, a loud magical alarm blared from within the tent, followed by a flash of gold light. Lee's head popped out, eyes dazzled. "I'm awake! I'm awake!" After a few hours with no further roars, Javik deemed it safe to set off. In the early morning, they piled into their canoes and continued through the swamp. Before long, they heard strange, babbling voices up ahead. Around a bend, floating in the water, they saw the black dragon that had been hunting them, clearly dead. Even stranger, they saw 6 small fishmen climbing all over it, trying and failing to pierce its hide with crude knives. The group approached. The fishmen noticed them and brandished their weapons. Arekk said he had an idea. The group, expecting another suggestion of violence, were pleasantly surprised when Arekk said he'd talk to them. He cast a spell and began conversing with them. The spell allowed him to understand them, with Arekk being surprised by how pleasant and eloquent the fishmen now sounded. Meanwhile, the rest of the group struggled to contain their laughter as Arekk babbled like a fishman. The fishmen claimed the dragon by the universal law known to all peoples. Finders, keepers. Arekk didn't dispute it, but pointed out that they had inflicted many of the dragon's wounds, so they had a claim too. Arekk proposed a deal. He'd give them a fine dagger that could pierce the dragon's hide in exchange for permission to harvest from the dragon. The fishmen agreed, and the group got to work. Coraline gathered potion ingredients, Doug and Zandros took teeth as trophies, and Javik leapt atop the corpse to shear off swathes of dragon hide. Arekk handed over the dagger with a flourish. As they sailed away, they saw the largest fishman holding the dagger aloft like a sacred relic, while the others babbled in praise. Coraline told Arekk she was proud of him for how he handled that. Arekk shrugged it off, but his small smile was unmistakable. They discussed the dragon's death as they went. Javik remarked that dragons often fought territorial battles, sometimes to the death. Lee agreed, saying another dragon had likely seen the black dragon's wounds and saw it as a chance to take them out. Finally reaching the swamp's edge, they exited the boats, distributed Lee's crates, and climbed the winding path up and out of the Stoican trench. Wind and fresh air greeted them for the first time in days. Before them stretched grassy, rolling hills, scattered woods, jagged mountains, and to the west, a volcano spewing ash into the sky. Behind them, the swamp emptied into a mighty river, carving its way through the southern valleys. They walked through tall grass until they reached a wide road filled with travelers heading east. Lee said they were likely going to the games, something the group realized they'd never actually asked him about. Lee pointed to the mountains. There, carved into their side, was the Brutalia, a colossal arena with a settlement built into the slopes below it. The Brutalic Games were hosted there once a year, drawing warriors, spectators, and traders from across the realm. Combatants battled each other, captured monsters, and arena champions for fame, glory, and incredible prizes. Javik was already planning to go, and Lee persuaded the rest to join, saying he'd be their sponsor, promising to stock them up with potions and to cover all their entry fees. They reached the arena town in the early evening. It was a white marble sprawl of inns, shops, and steep tiled streets. There was music, food stalls, performers, and carnival games. Everywhere was noise and color and celebration. Lee shouted over the din, saying that there was a festival every evening during the games. They'd missed signing up for the first day's events, but there was still time to sign up for tomorrow's. He took them to his shop, the Gilded Duke. It was lavishly decorated, though all the shelves were bare. He led them upstairs to a mostly empty storeroom, saying they could use it as lodgings. Lee left them to settle in while he unloaded his crates downstairs. A little later, Lee led the group up through the streets to the Warrior's Stair. At the top, whilst trying to catch their breath, they saw a circular pit filled with sand. Around it, a few Centurion attendants were packing up for the day, as a grizzled man, the trial master, stepped towards them. After calling them out for their lateness, he declared that not just anyone could sign up. He needed to see what they were made of. He asked if they preferred melee or magic. Doug and Javik said melee. Coraline and Arekk said magic. Zandros said both. The trial master decided to pit them against each other. Doug and Javik went first, dropping into the pit. The trial master shouted, "Begin!" and the two clashed, sword meeting axe. Javik was clearly the more experienced fighter, his footwork flawless, his strikes precise. But Doug was tough as iron. He pushed through each hit, recovered after every counter, then, with a mighty swing of Wendy, shattered Javik's guard, knocking him to the ground. "Cease!" The battle done, Doug offered Javik a hand up. The two clasped wrists, commending each other on a fight well fought. Coraline and Arekk were next. As they dropped into the pit, Arekk bragged, saying he'd conceived an unbeatable strategy. "Begin!" Coraline fired knives of ice in response. Arekk conjured a magical shield, her spells bouncing off harmlessly. He laughed, saying the shield was impenetrable. Holding the barrier toward Coraline, he began to prepare a powerful spell, purple energy dancing across his fingers. He unleashed it upon Coraline, but as soon as it took hold, it dissipated. She had resisted its effects. Enraged by his foolproof plan not being so foolproof, he failed to notice what happened next. Snaking from the pit wall behind Arekk came a tangle of druidic vines, bypassing his shield and wrapping him up in an instant. "Cease!" As Arekk was freed and ungagged by the vines, he angrily yelled that the match was unfair and accused Coraline of cheating. Coraline called him a sore loser and turned away. Rage burned within Arekk, hot as dragon fire. In his fury, Arekk lifted his arm and shot a gout of flames at Coraline's turned back. The trial master counterspelled it, as the centurions trained their spears on him. The trial master said that kind of conduct wasn't tolerated here. He admitted Arekk fought more than well enough to enter the lists. But what mattered more was fighting with honor. Arekk sneered, his eyes ablaze, saying that what mattered most was victory. Lee attempted to diffuse the tension, vouching for Arekk. The trial master, clearly knowing Lee, relented, but warned it was Arekk's first and last warning. Coraline, angry and confused, went and stood with the group. Arekk stood alone. Lastly, Zandros was called forward. The attendants lowered a cage into the pit. The trial master said he'd be fighting a beast. It'd be a true fight, not a sparring match like the others, asking if he accepted. Zandros dropped into the pit without a word. "Begin!" The cage door was raised, and from the dark interior prowled a saber-toothed tiger. Zandros summoned shadows to fill the pit, obscuring the cat's vision, but not his own supernatural sight. Hidden from the tiger and onlookers, he pulled out the jet-black stone and touched it to the confused beast. When the darkness cleared, the tiger was a pile of ash. The trial master's eyebrows rose. Zandros leapt out of the pit as an attendant swept the tiger into a dustpan. The trial master declared them all eligible to enter the games, though he warned them, looking at Arekk, that the privilege could be revoked. The group finished their ascent to the arena, stepping into the Hall of Heroes. Beneath the great vaulted ceilings, statues of champions, past and present, filled the hall. Walking toward the large statue of a dwarf in the hall's center, Lee told them that this was Balin Stonehune, the first and greatest champion of the arena. Coraline and Doug missed this as they were staring in disbelief at two other statues. Before them, in perfect likeness, were statues of their missing siblings. The two agreed to ask someone about their siblings tomorrow. At the back of the hall, they reached the lists, countless hanging scrolls outlining the times, rules, and prizes for all the gladiatorial events. After discussing, the group signed up for a Tier 3 group monster fight scheduled for the next morning. The prize, 5,000 gold and a rare magic item. As Coraline signed, the list vanished in a flash of light. At the same moment, another list vanished. Arekk had slunk off and signed up for a Tier 2 wizard's duel. The prize, 250 gold, and the loser's spellbook. "At least this one will be fair," he muttered bitterly. The group ignored him, heading back down the stairs and slopes to Lee's shop, Arekk trailing behind. Lee said he was going to retire for the evening, but encouraged the rest to enjoy the festival. Arekk followed Lee in without a word. The group wouldn't let Arekk's sulking ruin their night and headed out into the festival. Tired from their long, death-defying day, they decided to hit up a bar and save, checking out the other festivities for the following evening. In a lively outdoor bar, strewn with colored banners and glowing lights, they sat, talked, laughed, and drank. Javik and Zandros sat at the bar, trading monster-hunting stories while doing shots with the goblin bartender. Doug ended up catching the eye of a buxom dwarf named Gilda. After many drinks, dances, and mutual beard strokes, the two snuck away together, with Doug not making it back to Lee's shop that night. Coraline ended up chatting to two other genasi, a fire and an air genasi, who seemed to be a couple. Coraline, having never met other genasi, asked if they'd seen any others of their kind here. They said they had seen an Earth Genasi earlier in the day, joking that they should all team up and join the lists together. After recently having fire blasted at her back by a teammate, she briefly considered it, but declined, wishing them a good night. Reconvening, the group, minus one sullen elf and one very lucky dwarf, stumbled back to Lee's shop, where they collapsed into their bedrolls for a night of rest.